Hello, this video is a short presentation of some research methods that can help make the whole research process run more smoothly. So I want to start with the first strategy, which is before you even begin looking online, going to a library, doing any sort of research, it's important to stop, pause, and do kind of a knowledge check. Figure out what you already know about your topic. Often if I'm doing this, literally I'll just pull out a spare sheet of paper or I'll do it on my computer and I'll just write down everything that I already know. That helps you get sort of a place to start, first of all. But it also means that you don't duplicate research. There's no point in looking something up if it's already something that you have knowledge of. Instead, you want to figure out what you need to find. What do you not know? And so once you've listed out what you do know about your topic, then do the flip and list out what you need to find. The more specific you are in that list, the more helpful that's going to be when you actually go to do the research itself. And then if it's for an assignment or if it's for something, work related, whatever it is, make sure that you check what information is required. Like, what does your directions say that you need to include research wise, or that you need, what information do you have to include? Because again, that can give you some ideas about what it is that you're looking for. Once you have kind of that set out where you know what you're looking for, then you need to come up with some sort of plan. Don't just kind of delve in and start researching. That's not going to be very time effective. Instead, start by figuring out, where do you think the information that you need could come from? What types of sources would have that particular information? So for example, maybe I'm trying to find out what the national salary is for a certain type of job. And then I also want to find out, what is the local salary average for that same type of job? Is it different than the national? How does it compare? Well, I might step back and be like, well, maybe I could visit some career websites, or maybe I could look for websites that literally all they do is analyze and explore wages and have those comparisons. So I have an idea of what I'm looking for and where I can find it before I ever try and search for it. Another thing that you can do with this plan is actually write out a list of a whole bunch of different key terms and phrases that you could use while researching. So one of the kind of pieces that catches a lot of researchers up when they first start is they'll just have like one term in mind. And then they'll keep typing that term into different search engines and they keep not finding what they're looking for. But if they flip that phrase just a little bit, all of a sudden what they need emerges. So if you can have like a list of different terms, like I might use something like wage, salary, annual salary versus salary, or average salary. So I could come up with all these different phrases that I might be able to use to find what I'm looking for. And if you have those all written out, then you don't have to think about it as you're actually doing the research. You'll have them preset and ready to go. Another piece of the plan is figure out what parameters you need to put in place. So for instance, if I'm looking for, same example, wages for a particular type of job, well, do I care if they're from now, as in 2019, estimated 2020? Do I want them to be 10 years old? And if so, why? And so really think about those types of pieces. You might also consider if there's types of sources that are going to be more credible or more beneficial for you to find versus others. And then within the research, after you kind of have some of those parameters set, also decide, like, what do you think is the most important for you to look up? Prioritize your research so you're starting with the most important pieces that you need to find and then kind of going backwards. That way, if you do run out of time or something comes up, you will still have the key pieces to your research that you need early on. Another strategy is to go beyond Google. So I'm at fault of this, as probably most people are, in this sort of internet era that we live in. But going online and just clicking Google and typing in something is actually not a very effective search tool. Sometimes you might get some good information. Sometimes you might even find exactly what you need. But a lot of times what will happen is you'll type something in, and because Google is so big, it pulls in tons and tons, thousands and thousands of sources. Well, if you're going to sit and try and sift through pages and pages and thousands of sources, that is an insane amount of time that you have to put into something. And so if you can kind of get away from going to that as the first option, or maybe do that as just a quick initial search, but then delve into the actual specific research you're looking for. But again, just relying on Google alone is not a very good strategy. Something to consider is library databases. So colleges all have databases through their college that they subscribe to. That gives you all kinds of credible sources and information that you may not be able to find through a traditional search, because a database is actually not an internet search. It provides information in a very different way, and it catalogs information in a different way. So you'll actually find significant alternatives to information if you're actually looking through something like a library database. Also, college sources. So for instance, if you're looking at something career related, most colleges would have a career center. Why not reach out to them and see what information or what sources they might be able to provide? Or talk to other students or other librarians, your teachers. There's all kinds of places that you can do. And if you're doing this type of research outside of college, then local libraries often have this type of access that you can also get to. If you are a little bit limited, so you don't have that type of extra sources to look at, Google Scholar is not a bad place to go. Just be aware that sometimes on Google Scholar, it's going to pull up articles that it may ask you to pay for, which, I mean, if you can find it for free, of course, I think that's always better. But just be aware that that is kind of another option, and you can literally type Google Scholar into a search bar and it's going to pull up that particular search tool. And then finally, use primary research. This is actually one of the best ways to find the information that you need, is to go to some experts, go to actual people. First of all, it's often more credible because you're getting a firsthand account. You're not reading what someone else said who may have quoted what other people said. You're actually hearing it firsthand from someone in the field. And you can also often ask questions if you're doing an interview, for instance, to get the specific information that you need that you may not have found elsewhere. And so it's actually a great way to either supplement information you can't find, or to really find some of the key information that you need. And again, experts in their field are considered great sources of information and often have tidbits of information that really, quite honestly, are sometimes impossible to find online. So again, using that primary research is a great sort of way to go beyond Google. Now, once you start finding information, there's some tricks to make sure that you're keeping track of it all. And that means that you do need to track your information as you find it. First piece of tracking, once you find something you like, just check to make sure it's credible. Using the CRAP test, which is a CRAAP, is a great way to do that. You can look that up and find that kind of all over online. But things like just checking to make sure that if it's from the internet, that the sponsor for the website is credible, is someone you want to take information from. .org, .gov, .edu websites tend to be slightly more credible than some of the .com websites. Some .com websites are amazing. Some are sketchy and probably not something you'd want to pull information from, because of course then that impacts your own credibility. So just check to make sure that the sources really are places that you'd want to believe. Cite as you find. So it doesn't matter what types of citation you're using. Anytime you pull information from somewhere else, you got to give credit to it. So if you're in college, MLA, APA are probably the most common ones that you've been exposed to. But whatever type of citation you're going to use, make sure that you're doing that as you go. That's actually going to be a huge time saver later on, because then you're not going to be going back trying to find what you need to cite. It will all be there ready for you, ready to go. And then finally, kind of last two little bits, make sure that you save the information somewhere. So don't just have like a website URL and expect to go back to that. Sometimes URLs change. They don't always stay the same. Online is continually changing, updating, moving things around. So make sure that you actually save the information somewhere so you can access it. I almost always save it offline, so I'll save it either to some sort of flash drive, OneDrive, something that is not just out there on the internet, but it's actually local to my computer. A lot of times I'll have an email address set up for myself when I do research. I'll just send all everything I find to myself. That way I know I have it. And then also when you're doing that, organize the information. So I save everything as files just because that's the organization that works best for me. But when I do that, I need to label them a certain way so that I can find it. So if something's an article, I'll label it as an article with the title or what information it may include, so that when you're going back through later and you're looking at all these different sources you have, you'll be able to easily click and find the one that you need for the information that you need to pull from that particular source. Finally, maybe the most important strategy of all is simply time management. Out of all the parts of writing, research is the most time consuming. It just is. There's no like easy way around that. I wish I had better news, but I don't. It's hard. It takes time if you're going to really do it well. So a couple strategies. First of all, start early. If you procrastinate research, it's going to show and it's going to look like you procrastinated because you're not going to have the best, most up-to-date information, or it's not going to be very thorough. So make sure that you do start early in the research process. Don't try and do everything all in one sitting. One of the mistakes that I sometimes see researchers make is they'll literally sit down and think they're going to find everything they need in like an hour. That's just not realistic. So if you go in knowing that's not realistic, that can actually help. Now you might want to sit down and do an hour of research one day, have those priorities, right? Which priorities you're looking for, start with those, and then kind of do a few at a time, go down your list. But if you break it up into chunks, it's going to be much more manageable, and you're going to really be able to hone in on the specifics that you're looking for. And then finally, assume you're going to need to revisit research throughout the writing process. A research is not a one and done. It's a research to find all the information you think you need, do some writing, include that research, see what's missing, what maybe doesn't fit, what areas you didn't even think of to look for, and then go back and fill in the gaps or fill in the blanks within the document as needed. And then final note, ask your librarians for help. They are actually experts in the field of research. Like that's what they do, is catalog and search for information. And so a lot of times they may have strategies, tips, they may just know where exactly something is that you need. But if you don't ask, you might never, right, get that information. So don't be afraid to reach out to librarians. Again, either public librarians or librarians at the colleges are really helpful. Like, as long as you are friendly and nice, you're more than likely going to get some of the help that you need. And so those are just a few tricks and tips, strategies, again, to make the whole research process run smoother. And I hope you find this video helpful.